What's up, RotoBallers? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Jorden Hill, and with week 1 behind us, it's time to start making some important decisions regarding your fantasy roster. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the players that didn't quite meet expectations in week 1 and determine whether or not you need to bench them going forward or maybe move on from them entirely. Now, I know us fantasy gamers have a tendency to overreact early on in the season, and there's a lot of players that I could mention in this video. So really quickly, I'm just going to name a few guys that I'm not worried about whatsoever. I don't think you should read into these performances way too much. Starting at the quarterback position, pretty much anybody that you used an early round draft pick to take, such as Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, even Jalen Hurts. These guys didn't come through for you in week 1, but don't panic, just keep them locked into your lineup going forward. Speaking of Joe Burrow, I'm not worried at all about his receiver T. Higgins, who had 0 receptions on 8 targets. I think you can disregard this game entirely for the Bengals and expect Higgins to bounce back as early as next week. Rachaad White is another player that I think some may be worried about because he didn't have a productive fantasy showing, but he's one of only 6 RBs to receive a 75% or greater snap share in week 1. Now, this might not matter if he continues to be as inefficient as he was against the Vikings, but I still think he'll be a worthwhile fantasy option until we see a significant change with the utilization in Tampa Bay. Moving into some players that have legitimate cause for concern, let's start things off at the running back position with Antonio Gibson. Gibson finished with just 4 total touches for 19 total yards as Brian Robinson operated as the clear RB1 in Washington. Now, I'm definitely concerned with Gibson, especially because he lost a fumble in this one, and this isn't the first time we've seen Gibson lose a fumble and immediately end up in Ron Rivera's doghouse. Now, I think he'll hang on to the pass-catching role there for the Commanders, but I'm just not sure how valuable that role is going to be with this offense. I think you need to hang on to Gibson for at least another week, see what his opportunity looks like against Denver. You can't start him, but maybe just give it at least one more week before deciding if you really need to cut bait. Next up, we have DeAndre Swift, who played on just 19 snaps for Philadelphia. This was a running back room that was kind of hard to pin down all offseason long. We got some reports that Kenneth Gainwell would be the lead guy, and sure enough, he was exactly that in week 1. Rashad Penny was a last-minute healthy scratch, and we really have no idea what Penny's involvement will be going forward. With Swift, however, it doesn't seem like he's ever going to get a 3-down role with the Eagles. It's a tough situation for fantasy managers because we've seen how talented Swift is, especially as a pass catcher. Head coach Nick Sirianni did express some regret over the lack of involvement for Swift, so hopefully he sees an uptick in opportunities in week 2. But just like Gibson, I'd prefer to take a wait-and-see approach here, and I'm not interested in starting Swift next week. Unfortunately, I have the same advice regarding Cam Akers, who was outsnapped by Kyron Williams and only managed 29 rushing yards on 22 attempts. He did fall into the end zone for a touchdown, but it's hard not to be panicked about this showing, and things aren't going to get any easier for him next week against the 49ers. It wouldn't be shocking if Akers is just the RB2 behind Williams for the rest of the season, but it also wouldn't be surprising if the Rams choose to take a hot hand approach every week. The good news is that this offense looks way better than expected, but I think Akers is just a stash on your bench until we can gather some more information. Taking a look at some wide receivers, you got a 0 in your lineup if you started Drake London this week, as he was only targeted once by Desmond Ridder as the Falcons dominated on the ground. We knew this would be Atlanta's identity coming into the season, but I do think that they'll be forced to throw the ball more when they play some stronger opponents. With matchups against the Packers, Lions, and Jaguars on deck, I think London can offer some value as a flex play. If you have other options, I'd prefer to keep him on my bench for now, but there's reason to be optimistic considering how many snaps he logged in week 1. I'm really worried about Christian Kirk, who I thought was a great value at ADP coming into the season. It turns out his utilization in the preseason was very telling, as he operated exclusively as a slot receiver and left the field for 2 wide receiver sets. I knew Calvin Ridley would be a big factor in this offense, but I thought there would be enough to go around for both him and Kirk to succeed. This will be a situation to monitor, and hopefully Kirk can get more involved in a potentially high-scoring affair against the Chiefs next week, but if Kirk's snap counts continue to be this low, you'll probably have to move on sooner rather than later. Next, we'll discuss Rashad Bateman, who played on just 39% of snaps. That was barely more than Nelson Aguilar, as Zay Flowers and Odell Beckham were the clear top 2 wideouts in Baltimore. Now, I think it's definitely possible that Bateman eventually surpasses Beckham, but with Mark Andrews coming back and Zay Flowers establishing himself as a target hog this early, I think it's safe to cut ties with Bateman if you need to make a move this week. Finally, at tight end, the only name we have to mention is Dallas Goedert, who failed to get you any fantasy points and he only had 1 target. I think we can all relax here. Philadelphia struggled offensively against New England, and the tight end landscape in fantasy is so bad that I can't possibly imagine pivoting off of Goedert. Keep him in your lineup and expect him to bounce back. To recap, don't panic about any of the top QBs that may have let you down in week 1. Don't worry about T. Higgins, and be encouraged by Rachaad White's workload. Antonio Gibson, DeAndre Swift, and Cam Akers all gave us reasons to be concerned, and I think they're best left on your bench until we see a significant change in utilization. Drake London is a player that I don't see living up to his draft day cost, but he should be able to offer flex value in the right matchups. Christian Kirk's role in Jacksonville is definitely worth panicking about, and although I wouldn't cut ties with him just yet, he needs to be benched until further notice. Rashad Bateman seems to be the odd man out in Baltimore, and I think he can be safely dropped from your roster if there's an enticing player on your waiver wire. Dallas Goedert may have given you a goose egg in week 1, but he needs to remain starting in your fantasy lineups as the tight end position is far too volatile to consider any other options. Hope you guys enjoyed. Comment down below what players you're worried about after week 1. Please remember to leave a like on the video and subscribe to RotoBaller for more fantasy football advice that can help you win big in 2023. Thanks so much for tuning in, and best of luck in week 2.